yo ho, a pirate's life for me. What?
What are you doing?
I'm recording my Skull Tales Full Sail 2nd Edition miniature painting tutorial video.
You're supposed to be recording a review video.
Oops. Hey everyone, Nick here from Talking Cardboard, and in this video, I'm going to be doing a review of Skull Tales Full Sail 2nd Edition, published by Eclipse Editorial and designed by David Iglesias. This is a pirate-themed dungeon crawler board game that is cooperative, but also does have some semi-cooperative elements in it that I'll touch on in more detail shortly. But there's only 2 days and 10 hours left of the crowdfunding campaign for this game as of the recording of this video before I've of course edited it. And therefore I'm trying to make this as brief as possible so you can get an idea of whether this is a game that's worth backing for you. With that said, I will say immediately this is something that I thought was very exciting and interesting and very thematic. Now this game is for 1 to 5 players, so it could be played solo, and there are specific solo rules included in the rulebook. But definitely for that semi-cooperative element, you'll want to be playing with other players. But what makes this game unique from other dungeon crawler experiences is that there's 3 distinct phases in the game. The adventure phase, the voyage phase, and the port phase. Now, I'm not going to go into detail how you play the game in this video, but if you're curious how this game plays, I have recorded several playthroughs of this video on our Talking Cardboard YouTube channel. If you go to the live section of our YouTube channel, you can see that I recorded a couple sessions of the adventure phase with John from Talking Cardboard. Then I also did a playthrough of the port phase and then a partial playthrough of the voyage phase. So you can watch those to get a better idea of how the game works. But if you just want to understand what makes this game unique and what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it, that's what I'm going to be talking about here. So to make this a little easier, I'm going to go through each phase of the game since they're very different from one another and talk about what I liked and what I didn't like in each phase. And then at the end, give you kind of my overall thoughts and feelings of this game. So with that said, let's talk about the first phase, the adventure phase. Now, before I talk about the adventure phase, I do want to point out that when you're playing a campaign of Skull Tales Full Sail, you'll be going through this campaign book, and this is what guides you through a campaign. It's written kind of like an actual book because there's different chapters, and in each chapter you're going through the 3 different phases: the adventure phase, the port phase, and the voyage phase. But the majority of the content in this campaign book is relevant only for the adventure phase. And that brings me to one of the things that I really enjoyed about the adventure phase is just the flavor of the mission that you're going through. There's a lot of different objectives that you may or may not come across when you're playing when you're playing the adventure phase of the chapter, and I feel like that just adds to the replayability value. There's also a great variety of characters to choose from in Skull Tales, all of them highly thematic with different skills and weaknesses and abilities. So I really appreciated that aspect. Another important part of any dungeon crawler is the exploration of the map that you're playing, and I really enjoyed how that worked in Skull Tales. And I also really appreciated the variety of actions you had at your disposal. Yes, you do the traditional move, attack, and interact, but then there was the reload action, which was so thematic to me because, of course, during the age of piracy, those guns did not reload themselves. I thought the action options really introduced a nice decision space when playing the adventure phase. Now, along with actions, there's of course combat, and I really enjoyed how combat worked in Skull Tales. You either are going to be doing a melee attack or ranged attack, and it just felt thematic how combat was resolved. When you're rolling your attack dice, you're rolling against the agility of the enemy you're attacking. So yes, you might be rolling a lot of dice because you're highly skilled in melee or ranged combat, but if the enemy has a lot of agility, they're more difficult to hit. And there's also critical results that can introduce unique combat results. And overall, just really appreciated the flavor that combat introduced in Skull Tales and felt that it was very thematic. Finally, that brings me to enemy activation, which I thought was pretty seamless and did not bog down the game. Obviously, an important part of any cooperative dungeon crawler because you'll be resolving the enemy's turn every round, and obviously some games suffer from too much time being spent on the enemy activation. But in Skull Tales, I did feel like we were not taking much time at all to handle the enemy's turn. Now, in terms of things that I didn't appreciate so much about the adventure phase, I'll start with the event cards. During every round of the adventure phase, you're drawing a event card from the event card deck. And a lot of times these events weren't relevant for us. And the rulebook clearly states that if you draw a event card and it's not relevant because of the tiles you're on or the game state, you just ignore it and move on. And I just thought that was kind of a missed opportunity to somehow incorporate some aspect that still allows you to do something with the event card or force you to only use event cards that are relevant for the scenario you're playing. Additionally, when it comes to enemy activations, they were seamless and didn't bog down the game, but I didn't really find them being very exciting or flavorful. Essentially, they were just moving and attacking. I will say that we were only playing with the very basic enemies, and there's many more enemies that come with the game that we didn't get to experience. So it's quite possible the other enemies do have more flavorful turns, but in the first scenario, first mission, the red coats were kind of boring in my opinion, but again, they were easy to resolve, so I'm not going to complain too much about that. And finally, there's a lot of minutia in the rulebook for the adventure phase. An example is the fact that once you lose at least 1 point of health, you now have one less activation or action point. And that's very easy to forget. And there's not really there's not really a token or component to help you remember that easily. You kind of would have to come up with your own system to keep track that you have one less action point on your turn. Another example is when you're attacking with the same hand twice, you get a -1 die roll penalty on that second attack. Those are just a few examples. There's a few others in the rulebook. I will say all of this rule minutia does add theme to the game. So that's the penalty you pay for, I guess, a more thematic gameplay experience. Because, for example, when you get wounded, it makes sense that you can't do as many actions as you could because you're wounded. And it makes sense that on that second attack with the same hand, it's not as effective because you're maybe tired from the first attack. But it then just adds rules that you need to remember. And that's something that I don't necessarily have a problem with, but it is something that can be annoying to certain players. So that's the adventure phase. Now let's talk about the port phase. So in the port phase of Skull Tales, that's where you can spend all the riches you've earned during the adventure phase and all the prestige you gained and try to better your character, either by getting better equipment or learning new skills that will make your character or your pirate more effective. Now, one of the first things that I really enjoyed about the port phase was the time system. So essentially, once you get to port, you have 20 time units to spend to do various activities. This includes time spent just to move from one location to another, but also the time spent for the various actions you can do at each location. So you have this kind of mini game going on as to prioritizing what you want to spend your time on when you go to port, because you're not going to be able to do everything you want. You have to prioritize, and I really thought that was a fun little decision that you had to make. I also found the port phase to be very thematic. All the locations just seemed like locations you would find in a typical pirate-themed port, such as the docks, the tavern, Madame Claude's Manor, the church, the market. And each of these locations had very asymmetric activities that you could do at them. And also, whenever you go to a location, you were drawing an event card that was unique to that location. And unlike in the adventure phase, where sometimes you were drawing event cards that weren't really relevant, in the port phase, every time I was drawing an event card, I did think it was relevant and thematic and fun to resolve. And finally, you just had so many options to do in the port phase. You can go to the docks and upgrade the ship if you're the captain. You can decide to heal up if you're heavily wounded, either at the church or at the tavern. You can try to find some rumors that may lead to more money and prestige if you're successful with taking that rumor and doing something with it. You can also learn all these different skills to improve the various aspects of your pirate, and there's more. You can play. There's games that you can play that require you to beat skill checks to earn money and prestige. So All of that also was very thematic and just immersed yourself that much more in the world of Skulltails. So really appreciated that part of the port phase. Now there was only one aspect of the port phase that kind of bugged me a little bit, and that was the market location. Because when I went there to try and buy some equipment for my pirate, I just felt that the options I had were not that exciting. And I got a lot of sword options, for example, because you're randomly drawing items to buy from the deck of item cards. And that was a little disappointing because I had money, I wanted to spend it, and I just didn't have any good options at the market. Now, I will say there's so much expansion content for the crowdfund campaign going on right now that maybe a lot of the expansion content does introduce more item cards that you could acquire in the market. So hopefully that's the case and the expansion kind of rectify that part. That was one thing that was just a little disappointing because I was really excited to get some better items and weapons for my surgeon, and unfortunately they just weren't available when I went to the market. But other than that, I will say that I thought the port phase was very well done. And so now we'll talk about the last phase, which is the voyage phase. Finally, we've come to the voyage phase, which honestly I think has the most stuff in it that gets me excited about Skulltails. I recently said this in a TikTok, but it's like I was reliving playing the PC game Sid Meier's Pirates. You're going through the Caribbean on your boat, and you're coming across all sorts of different things like other ships, all these different islands that you could dock at, and there's just so much going on, and it just feels you can go off in any direction, and that really is what you could do in the voyage phase of Skulltails. There's just so many decisions to make in terms of where you want to go with your ship, but also what you want to do on your ship. Every round in the voyage phase, you're moving your pirates as well as these crew members to various action spaces on your ship that accomplish different things, such as helping you move your ship, clean your ship, repair your ship. You eventually want to start moving your crew and pirates to the cannons to man those. You may want to move them to the crow's nest or to drive the boat. There's just all these different action spaces that are important, but you can't have pirates and you don't have enough pirates and crew to man them all. And so every round it's a puzzle of what you think is most important given where you're at in the voyage phase, and I really thought that was well done. I really appreciated how ship combat worked. Basically, you have only so many cannons on your ship, and you can buy more cannons, of course, but depending on the number of cannons, that's how many dice you're rolling when you were to finally attacking other ships. And you can decide to shoot at just the sails of an enemy ship, and you can load your cannons with different types of gunshot, depending on what you're trying to do when attacking another ship. If you're going just to damage it so you can board it, or if you're trying to destroy it outright. Movement also was very thematic to me. Basically, you can move as much as you have sails and crew manning the sails, but also you're rolling against your cargo rate, which is based on how much cargo you have. So the more cargo you have, the slower your ship is, the more difficult it is to move. So I really thought movement was handled well and appreciated that part of the voyage phase. And I also just love the idea of these crew tokens. So of course, you have your own pirates, and eventually you can get allies in Skulltails 2, which is done during the port phase. I forgot to mention that. Also, just a really neat idea that you can basically find allies to bring onto your ship. But during the voyage phase, you have crew tokens that represent that. Their crew. Their tokens that represent like a gang of different pirates that are on your ship. And as the captain, you get to move them around the ship to the various locations. And it just felt thematic, and they can take wounds. They're fighting for you. I just loved it, and I just thought that was very well done. And then finally, they have island landing. So if you ever wanted to, you could decide, hey, I want to land on this island and hunt for some treasure or goods, and whatever you find, you can bring back with you to a future port phase and make money off it. And then you're also always drawing event cards throughout the voyage phase, which I find very thematic, as they will introduce potential enemies that you'll have to face or opportunities that you can go after. There's just so much going on. And that brings me to one of the things that kind of was almost disappointing, is there was almost too much going on. When I did my voyage playthrough, I drew an event card that was a boarding scenario where there was a bunch of tribal warriors now I had to fight. And it took a lot of time to resolve that combat, like 20, 30 minutes. And that was just one event card for the full voyage phase. And I didn't go through many more event cards after that, but I had a lot left that I still needed to accomplish during my voyage phase, and that was within the first few minutes of starting. So I do worry that the voyage phase can quickly bog you down, especially if you're playing with multiple players and trying to collectively agree on what actions you want to do during your turn in the voyage phase. Also, one mechanic that they have in the voyage phase was the idea of keeping your ship clean. It's a minor gripe, but it's annoying. You only have so many crew members at your disposal so having to use one to clean was just kind of felt underwhelming and lame, honestly, but it is what it is. And finally, a big part of Skulltail seems to be this semi-cooperative aspect that the designer really wanted to drive home. And that's, I think, most clear or most prevalent during this voyage phase, where during the voyage phase, you will be gaining, all pirates are gaining what's called trust points. And eventually, if you gain enough trust points compared to your morale token, a pirate can decide to try to do a mutiny and take over the captaincy. Now, the bad part is if you're trying to do that, you're then not trying to do something helpful for your crew. And I get thematically that that's what being a pirate's all about. Pirates are trying to vie for the captaincy, and I understand it. I'm not going to say that it shouldn't be in the game. It's just something that I feel some players may be annoyed of, and I think some player groups would have to decide before they even start a campaign of Skulltails, hey, are we going to play with this mechanic, or are we just going to play a full cooperative game? But it also seems wrong to ignore the idea of this mutiny aspect of the voyage phase because there's so many rules around it. So I feel like it's kind of a big part of playing Skulltails, and you kind of have to understand going into a game of Skulltails that, hey, players may try to steal cargo from you, and you're going to have to be okay with that and deal with it. And I can definitely see play groups enjoying and embracing that part of Skulltails too. I just put it as something that I personally don't know if I would enjoy, because I play cooperative games because I want to win or lose together, and this kind of throws a wrench into that. But maybe I could find myself, if in the right play group, enjoying that part of Skulltails too. Anyway, that's just one thing that I wanted to mention. Otherwise, I really did enjoy the voyage phase, and it felt so thematic. So definitely, of the three phases, probably what excites me the most about Skulltails, even though there is so much going on. Alright, so that's what I thought about each individual phase of Skulltails, and overall I will say that I do really enjoy this game. I will say that I think the 150 minutes per chapter on the box is not very accurate, because I think you could spend 150 minutes on the adventure phase alone or the voyage phase alone. However, at the end of the day, that's the experience. That's what you're getting with Skulltails. You're getting a very thematic and in-depth role-playing pirate-themed board game. And that may turn some players away, but also I would imagine a lot of players have been looking for that type of experience their whole lives, and finally you can have that with Skulltails. If you really enjoy that pirate theme type of experience and gameplay. And if you've watched the show, Black Sails, I watched that before I really started getting into Skulltails, but I felt that there were so many similarities in watching the show Black Sails and then playing Skulltails. There's a lot of aspects that I thought were carried over from the show, and I'm not saying this game was designed at all to mimic the show, but it just helped me immerse myself in the world of Skulltails. So just throwing that out there, if that's something that you already have watched, or if you're interested in a good pirate themed show to get you motivated to play something like Skulltails, definitely check that out. Something else that I really want to point out is there's so much expansion content now too for Skulltails. This video was really just focused on the core box, but if you go on to the GameFound campaign page, you'll see all this other content that they're releasing for Skulltails that I imagine really adds even more to the experience. Something, for example, is more solo play content. I didn't really touch on that in detail because in the core game, there's only little blurbs here and there about how to handle certain situations of playing the game solo. For example, it recommends you playing with a couple allies right from the get-go, I believe. And Also, of course, with the mutiny aspect that I talked about during the Voyage Phase, that would get handled differently if playing solitaire as well. But there's a new expansion coming out that even adds more depth in for a solo player. So that's something to check out too if you're interested in solo only gameplay. And again, I know I did not go into detail as to how this game actually works in this video. Again, check out the playthrough videos that we have on our Talking Cardboard live section, because that will give you a better understanding of how this game works. There's just so much to go through, and if I did a full overview of the game, it would probably take me 1 hour. And again, because this game campaign only has 2 days left, I really just wanted to get my thoughts out on camera for anyone on the fence about backing this game. So with that said, thank you so much for watching this video. Please consider following us and subscribing to our Talking Cardboard YouTube channel if you're not already. And then also check out our Talking Cardboard TikTok. Follow us there. I'm trying to be more proactive about going live on our TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube. So depending on what your preference is, those are all platforms that we're using for live playthrough sessions. And of course, we'll continue making videos like this and putting them up on our YouTube page. So again, thank you so much for watching. Check out the Skull Tales Game Found page. There's only 2 days left, so please check that out quickly. And thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you all again soon.